Elias stood at the edge of the cargo bay and watched the loading drones move in straight lines. They never hesitated. They never questioned orders. In that way, they were perfect for the Empire. Humans were not. The ship was called the Sovereign Wake. It was larger than most cities Elias had seen on his homeworld. It carried soldiers, officials, and secrets across star systems that humans were never allowed to name. Elias had served on it for 4 cycles. He had learned when to speak, when to lower his eyes, and when to disappear into the background. He was good at being unseen. His job was simple. He checked supply numbers, confirmed delivery paths, and made sure nothing went missing. Humans were trusted with small things because the Empire believed small things did not matter. Elias knew better. Small things always mattered. They were the cracks where change could begin. A sharp tone echoed through the bay, an order signal. Not meant for him. He ignored it and kept working on his tablet. Then his screen went dark. That never happened. A new symbol appeared. Black and silver. High authority. His breath slowed. Humans did not receive direct signals from command level. Ever. The message was short. Report to inner command chamber. Immediate. No explanation. No error code. Elias looked around. The other workers kept moving. None of them had received the signal. He swallowed and locked his tablet. His hands were steady, but his chest felt tight. He had seen humans disappear after messages like this. Not often, but enough. He walked out of the bay and into the main corridor. The lights shifted as he passed, reacting to his assigned clearance. Low clearance. Always low. 2 guards waited at the transit gate. Tall, armored, their faces hidden behind smooth masks. One of them scanned Elias. The other did not move. The gate opened. The inner command chamber was quiet in a way that felt heavy. The walls, curved inward, dark metal marked with old symbols. This room was not built for humans. The air was cooler. The gravity slightly higher. Every step felt like pressure. She stood near the center. Valera. She was the ship's commander, chosen by the Empire itself. Her species ruled not through numbers, but through fear and control. Her presence alone made lower ranks struggle to breathe. Elias had seen her only from a distance before. Now she stood less than 10 steps away. She did not look at him right away. He stopped where protocol demanded and lowered his head. Human, she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried power. Not loud, not soft. Certain. Yes, Commander, Elias replied. She turned then and studied him. Her eyes were sharp, reflecting the light in a way that made them seem endless. Elias kept his face blank. Showing emotion was dangerous. You have served on this ship for 4 cycles, she said. You have made no errors worth recording. Yes, Commander, you do not seek promotion. No, Commander, you do not complain. No, Commander. Silence stretched. Elias felt every second. This was not an inspection. This was something else. There is unrest, Valera said at last. Not among your kind. Among mine. Elias said nothing. He was not allowed to comment on such matters. Loyalty is questioned, she continued. Power is tested. She walked closer. Each step was measured. Elias did not move. Your species is known for adaptability, she said. For endurance. Yes, Commander, yet you are considered weak. Elias felt the familiar sting of truth mixed with insult. He accepted it without reaction. Valera stopped directly in front of him. Today, she said, I will test that belief. She raised her hand, and the chamber seals closed. Elias heard the sound and understood its meaning. No one entered or left without her will. Show your fidelity, she ordered. You will be with me tonight, human. The words were clear, simple, final. Elias did not understand them at first. His mind searched for protocol, for hidden meaning. Fidelity. Being with her, tonight, none of it fit standard command language. He lifted his eyes before he could stop himself. Valera watched his reaction closely. This is not desire, she said, reading his confusion. This is command. Yes, Commander, Elias said automatically. You will remain under my authority until the cycle ends, she said. Your compliance will be observed. Observed. By whom? He did not ask. If you refuse, she continued, you will be removed. Removed could mean many things. None of them good. I accept, Elias said. The words felt heavy, but they were true. Refusal was not an option. Survival often meant choosing the path that allowed time. Valera stepped back. You may go, she said. Prepare. The seals opened. The pressure lifted slightly. Elias bowed and turned away, his legs moving on training alone. The corridor felt different now. Every step echoed louder. He could feel eyes on him, though none were visible. The ship knew. Systems always knew. By the time he reached the lower living decks, whispers had already begun. Humans noticed first. They always did. What happened? One asked quietly. Elias shook his head. Work order. They did not believe him, but they did not push. Fear lived deep in human habits now. Later, as he sat alone in his small room, Elias replayed the moment again and again. The words, the tone, the sealed chamber. This was not about him. He accessed restricted history files using a route he had learned long ago. Small things. Forgotten paths. He searched for the word fidelity. What he found made his stomach tighten. In the Empire's past, fidelity tests were used during internal collapse. They were designed to expose weakness, false loyalty, and hidden threats. They were public acts disguised as private commands. A human had never been used this way before. Elias leaned back and stared at the ceiling. If this was a test, then eyes would be watching. Not just Valera's. Others would be waiting for him to fail. Or to break. He thought of the other humans on the ship. Quiet workers, engineers, medics. People who kept the Empire running without being seen. If he failed, the message would be clear. Humans could be used, controlled, and discarded. If he succeeded, the message might be worse. A soft alert sounded. Another message. Surveillance protocols activated. He almost smiled. They wanted obedience, submission, silence. Elias closed his eyes and began to plan. Humans had survived worse than this. They had survived because they learned when to bend and when to stand still. Fidelity did not mean giving yourself away. It meant choosing what you truly served. Tonight was coming, and the Empire had no idea what it had just invited into its inner chambers. Elias woke to the soft hum of the ship's engines. The room was darker than usual, the lights dimmed for energy conservation, or perhaps for secrecy. He moved carefully to the door, knowing the guards were watching. He was expected, yet he was never truly free. The order from Valera still weighed on him. Fidelity. Tonight. Everything that had been safe and routine was now uncertain. He walked through the corridors slowly, observing the other crew. They moved with purpose, unaware of his unique assignment. Some cast quick glances, curious about the whispered rumors of a human under the commander's direct notice. None dared ask, and none would speak openly. Fear had trained them well. As he approached the inner chambers, the air shifted. It felt colder, heavier. Humans were not designed for these levels of pressure and scrutiny. The walls themselves seemed to judge him, as if they knew the Empire had broken a rule by calling a human to this space. Valera was waiting. Her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She did not speak at first. Her eyes examined him, sharp and calculating, as if measuring the space between his steps, the rhythm of his breath, even the thoughts behind his calm exterior. You have arrived early, she said finally. Her voice carried a strange weight, a mixture of authority and curiosity. Yes, Commander, Elias replied, keeping his tone neutral. Words were not just sounds here. They were proof of understanding and obedience. You understand the meaning of what you were asked to do? She asked. Yes, Commander. I will remain under your direction until the cycle ends. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Do you truly understand? Elias did not flinch. He had spent cycles learning to read the Empire's language of power, its hidden threats, its tests. He understood more than they realized. Fidelity in the Empire's history was never simple obedience. It was alignment, not just of action, but of thought. To be faithful meant to be used as an example, a tool, and a warning, all at once. You will walk with me through restricted zones, she said. You will see things no human has ever seen. You will hear things no human has ever been allowed to hear. Yes, Commander, he said again. The journey began. The corridors changed as they moved deeper into the ship, tighter spaces, walls lined with control panels, screens showing streams of data, some of it redacted, some blinking with urgent alerts. Humans were allowed only brief glances at this information, yet now Elias had full exposure. This ship is more than it seems, Valera said quietly. It carries power, information, and secrets, and humans, you are always overlooked, always underestimated. Elias kept his face neutral. Being underestimated could be an advantage. They think loyalty can be measured by obedience alone, she continued. But I watch actions, decisions, the space between choices. You, human, will show me something the Empire has not seen in cycles. He thought of his people, the humans scattered across ships and stations, surviving quietly, unnoticed, undervalued. They had always found a way to endure, and now he would serve as the test, the anomaly, the proof. They reached a chamber filled with alien officers from different systems. They paused and looked at Elias, their eyes sharp, their whispers soft but deliberate. A human had never been brought into this level of council. Some of them moved subtly, positioning themselves as if ready to challenge or attack. Valera did not introduce him. He did not speak unless spoken to. He simply stood, calm, observing. A sudden alert came across the room. One of the officers gasped, their tone urgent. An attack was detected on a nearby station. Protocols flashed red. Everyone reacted instantly, but Elias noticed the misalignment in their response, a detail that could be exploited, corrected, or used. He stepped forward quietly. "The station's defense system will fail if redirected incorrectly," he said. Every eye turned to him. Humans were not supposed to speak in this chamber, let alone give corrective information. Valera's eyes gleamed with approval, subtle but unmistakable. She nodded slightly, acknowledging his input. Others muttered in disbelief, but adjusted their actions. The station was saved. A disaster avoided. The chamber's tension sifted. Whispers turned to silent calculations. The human had acted, yet without arrogance, without challenge, simply with knowledge and observation. Later, alone in another restricted chamber, Elias accessed hidden files. He found histories of previous fidelity tests, noting failures and successes. Each human or lower-ranked being who had been used as a test had been discarded, punished, or broken. None had survived to shape policy. None had altered the outcomes of the Empire's designs. He understood the stakes. This was more than obedience. This was survival, reputation, and influence. One wrong step could end not only his life, but also the perception of all humans across the fleet. When Valera returned, she did not speak immediately. Instead, she watched him as he worked, examining the data, tracing patterns, predicting outcomes. "You understand the weight of what you do," she said finally. "Yes, Commander," Elias replied. "I understand it fully." She studied him a long moment. "Then we will continue. You will stay close, observe, act only when necessary, and show me your fidelity." Elias nodded, though his mind was already moving forward. Fidelity could mean many things. Obedience was only one. Survival, influence, subtle redirection, patience, these were all tools of fidelity as humans understood it. As they walked through another corridor, a sudden alarm blared. Screens flashed warnings, systems were compromised. Alien officers scrambled, confused, and panicked. Valera remained calm, but Elias saw the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightening of her jaw. He stepped forward again. "The breach is inside the auxiliary core. If the response is delayed, we risk cascading failures across multiple systems," he said. His voice was steady. Valera turned to him, expression unreadable. "And what would you have us do, human?" Elias gestured to a sequence on the screen. "Redirect power through the secondary arrays. It will hold long enough for engineers to regain control. Delay too long and we lose the station." A tense moment passed. Then Valera nodded. The command was given, the crisis averted, and the chamber breathed again. Elias realized something crucial. The Empire had always believed humans could not handle command, strategy, or quick problem-solving under pressure. They had assumed weakness. Tonight, he proved otherwise. Quietly, subtly, without confrontation. The night stretched on. Every chamber, every system, every officer now seemed to watch him differently. Not with open hostility, but with curiosity, wariness, and a hint of respect. He had survived the first test, but this was only the beginning. Later, in the private corridor leading back to Valera's chambers, she spoke again. "You have done more than expected. Humans are surprising." Elias's lips remained straight. "We survive," he said simply. "Survival is different from loyalty," she said. "Yet tonight, you have shown me both. I will watch, and I will see if this continues." Elias understood the unspoken truth. The Empire had never prepared for a human to act with subtle power, intelligence, and calm in moments of crisis. His presence was no longer simple obedience. It was influence, quiet, unseen, and dangerous to those who underestimated him. The cycle continued, and the test deepened. Fidelity was more than following orders. It was endurance under pressure, clarity under threat, and choosing the right moment to act. Elias had begun to understand how to show fidelity that no one would predict or control. He returned to his quarters for a brief rest, though sleep would not come easily. The weight of the Empire's scrutiny remained. Every alert, every shadow, every whispered rumor was part of the test. And tonight, more than ever, he realized that being human in an empire of aliens was both the greatest weakness and the greatest strength. Outside, the ship moved through the darkness of space, carrying secrets, officers, and humans like him. Inside, Elias prepared for the next stage, knowing that every action from this point forward could change the perception of humanity forever. I was no longer just a worker, just a human under command. He was a participant in a subtle power struggle, one that had only just begun. Fidelity was not simple obedience. It was the quiet, intelligent assertion of value where no one expected it. And Elias would show the Empire exactly what that meant. Elias moved through the corridors of the Sovereign Wake with measured steps. Each light that shifted as he passed, each panel that hummed under the weight of power, reminded him that he was walking in a world not built for humans. Yet tonight, he was expected to be more than just a passenger. He was under Valera's direct observation, and the weight of her command pressed on him like gravity. The inner chamber doors opened ahead of him, revealing a space filled with alien delegates. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Every officer, every envoy, every strategist turned to look at him. Humans were rarely allowed in this chamber. They were thought too small, too weak, too inconsequential. And yet, here he was. Valera stood at the center, her posture precise, her gaze scanning the room. When she noticed Elias, her eyes briefly softened, though only enough for him to catch the shift. She did not speak. Not yet. Her presence alone commanded silence. "You are aware of why he is here," she said to the delegates, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. The assembly murmured. Whispers of disbelief rippled through the room. A human in their midst disrupted the hierarchy. It challenged the assumptions the Empire had long held about species and capability. Elias said nothing. He waited, observing. Every whisper, every glance, every subtle movement told him more than words could. This was a test not just for him, but for the Empire itself. A sudden alert flashed across the central console. An attack on a nearby supply station had been detected. Panic stirred among the officers. Their reactions were immediate, precise, but flawed. Elias saw the miscalculation in their approach, the flaw that could escalate the situation into disaster. He stepped forward. "Redirecting power through the secondary arrays will stabilize the station," he said calmly. His voice was firm but unassuming. All eyes turned to him. For a moment the room froze. Humans were not supposed to intervene. Their input was considered unnecessary, even dangerous. She had expected nothing from him, and yet he acted with clarity and precision. Without hesitation, she issued the command to follow his guidance. Engineers and officers moved to adjust the systems as Elias instructed. The crisis passed. The station system stabilized. Some delegates whispered, uncertain whether to acknowledge his contribution. Others simply stared, processing what had just occurred. Valera did not comment immediately. Instead, she allowed the silence to stretch, letting the delegates feel the disruption Elias had caused. Power, she knew, was often revealed in subtle ways. Later, she led him through restricted corridors to the ship's data archives. Humans were rarely permitted here. The air was cooler, the walls lined with panels and screens showing streams of unfiltered information. Every detail, every log, every secret pulse of the Empire's operations was visible. "You will see more than any human before you," she said quietly. "Observe carefully. Every action, every failure, every success will be recorded. Fidelity is not just obedience. It is understanding. It is the ability to act under observation without faltering." Elias nodded. He understood. He had studied the Empire's history, learned the patterns of power, and observed the weaknesses that others overlooked. His kind had survived for centuries not through strength, but through adaptability. Hours passed as they moved through the chambers. Elias recorded, memorized, and calculated. He identified small errors, subtle threats, and inconsistencies in the flow of information. Each observation was a quiet assertion of human capability, a proof of intelligence that the Empire had long denied. At one point, Valera paused at a terminal. "A human in this chamber is not accepted," she said softly. "Yet you act as though it is natural. That in itself is a challenge to the old order." Elias did not reply. Actions spoke louder than words. He returned to his observations, noting the movement of officers, the timing of data pulses, the subtle errors that could become catastrophic if unchecked. Another alert sounded. This time, an anomaly in the ship's auxiliary power grid threatened multiple sectors. Officers rushed to respond, confusion evident on their faces. Elias stepped forward again, calmly outlining a solution. Divert power through the tertiary conduits. It will prevent overload and maintain system stability until repairs are complete. The officers followed his instructions. The crisis was averted. Valera's gaze lingered on him, assessing, calculating, acknowledging without a word. She had placed a human in a position of observation and decision-making under extreme pressure, and he had performed flawlessly. The chamber cleared, leaving only Valera and Elias. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the weight of understanding. She spoke finally, her voice measured. You have demonstrated more than obedience. You have shown clarity under pressure. That is what fidelity truly requires. Elias absorbed her words. Fidelity was not blind loyalty. It was presence, awareness, and action. It was knowing when to move and when to remain still. It was understanding the weight of command and the subtle influence one could wield within constraints. They moved to a quieter chamber, one used for private observation and recording. Valera watched him work with data streams, comparing information, predicting outcomes, and identifying potential risks. Her eyes never left him. You understand the implications of your actions, she said. Each decision you make affects not just yourself, but the perception of your entire species within this empire. Yes, Commander, he said. I understand. A new alert appeared, minor but persistent. A security breach in one of the lower decks. Officers were rushing, unsure of cause or consequence. Elias analyzed the data and noticed the patterns of sabotage. It was subtle, meant to test not just systems, but confidence and trust. He guided the response quietly. The actions were taken with precision. The sabotage was contained before it escalated. The officers involved were unaware that their plans had been anticipated and corrected by a human. Valera observed, her expression unreadable. Yet a slight tension in her shoulders revealed her satisfaction. She had tested the system, tested him, and found that humans could act with insight and efficiency, even under conditions designed to expose weakness. Hours later, they returned to a private chamber. The weight of observation remained, but Elias felt a subtle shift. The Empire had underestimated him, the officers had doubted him. Valera had tested him, and he had responded with calm, precise action. You have survived tonight, she said. Not merely as a human under command, but as a participant in the subtle workings of power. Fidelity is no longer a matter of obedience. It is knowledge, influence, and timing. Elias nodded. He understood. The night was far from over. Each challenge, each observation, each crisis would test him further. But he also knew that humans had survived countless pressures, countless threats, countless systems designed to suppress them. Survival required more than obedience. It required understanding, patience, and action at the precise moment it mattered most. Valera left him with a single instruction. Prepare for what comes next. Fidelity will be observed in ways you have not yet imagined. Alone, Elias reviewed the events of the night. He had learned, adapted, and survived. He had proven that humans could act with clarity, precision, and influence even under the Empire's strictest surveillance. The ship moved silently through space, carrying its secrets, its power, and the human who had begun to change how it viewed strength and loyalty. Elias knew the next test would be harder, the observation closer, and the stakes higher. And yet, he also knew that fidelity could be shown in ways the Empire could not control or predict. His presence, quiet and measured, had already begun to shift the balance. Tonight, humans were no longer invisible. They were watched. They were noted. They were acknowledged. And in that recognition, power began to stir quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment to act. Elias walked through the halls of the Sovereign Wake, the weight of Valera's order still heavy on him. Every corner, every control panel, every officer moving about reminded him that he was in a world that was not built for humans. Tonight, he was not just a worker. He was a participant in the Empire's hidden tests, observed and measured at every step. Valera met him at the entrance to a private corridor. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, as always. You will see things tonight that most humans cannot imagine, she said. Every decision, every hesitation will be noticed. Fidelity is measured not in obedience alone, but in understanding and action under scrutiny. Yes, Commander, Elias said. He had learned to answer quickly, calmly, and without hesitation. Words were small shields in a world of watchful eyes. They moved deeper into the ship, to a level humans rarely entered. The air felt heavier here, denser, the lights dimmer and colder. Panels lined the walls, screens flickering with raw data streams. Systems hummed with energy that humans were not meant to touch. Yet tonight, Elias was expected to understand, to navigate, to observe without error. They reached a chamber where the Empire's advisors gathered. Aliens from different worlds, different ranks, and different powers filled the space. Conversation stopped as Elias entered. A human in this level of authority was unheard of. Their gazes, sharp and curious, weighed on him. Valera did not introduce him. That was unnecessary. Their surprise and disbelief were enough. The human was here, observing, acting, participating. That alone challenged their assumptions. A sudden alert sounded across the room. A minor breach had been detected in one of the lower decks. Panic stirred, quick and immediate. Officers moved to respond, but their actions were misaligned. Small errors hidden in the urgency. Elias noticed the flaw instantly. Redirect the auxiliary power to the affected sector before engaging the containment protocols, he said calmly. The words were precise, without emotion. The officers paused, uncertainty visible in their movements. Humans were not supposed to give orders here, not in moments of crisis. Yet, Valera issued the command to follow his guidance. Engineers adjusted systems as Elias instructed. The breach was contained before it could escalate. The chamber relaxed slightly, but the tension remained. Elias had acted quietly and efficiently without arrogance. He had saved time, resources, and potentially lives. The Empire had assumed weakness. He had shown capability. Later, Valera led him through a series of restricted corridors, deeper into the ship. They passed chambers filled with data cores, security arrays, and monitoring stations. Humans were not allowed here. They were not trusted with this level of information. You will observe closely, she said. Every pattern, every error, every decision. Fidelity is not obedience. It is understanding the system, influencing outcomes without overstepping, and acting with precision when necessary. Elias absorbed the meaning. Fidelity was subtle. It was influence under observation. It was surviving under pressure while demonstrating capability. Humans had endured by knowing when to bend and when to act. Tonight, he would show the Empire how human fidelity was more than obedience. Hours passed as they moved through the chambers. Elias identified errors, subtle threats, and inconsistencies that could lead to disaster if left unchecked. Each observation, each quiet correction, was proof of human intelligence and adaptability. At one point, Valera stopped. Your kind is often underestimated, she said. Yet you act as if you belong here. That itself is a challenge to the Empire. Elias remained silent. Actions mattered more than words. He continued his observations, tracing patterns, predicting outcomes, and noting risks. Another alert sounded more severe this time. The ship's auxiliary systems threatened to overload. Officers scrambled, their panic subtle but present. Elias stepped forward. Divert power through the tertiary conduits. It will stabilize the systems until engineers regain control. The officers obeyed, and the threat was neutralized. No one outside Valera fully understood how close the ship had come to crisis. Elias had acted quietly, efficiently, without challenge but with authority, Valera observed, unreadable but approving. She had placed a human under extreme scrutiny, in situations designed to reveal weakness. He had responded with calm, insight, and action. Later, alone in a private chamber, Valera spoke. You have survived tonight not as a subordinate, but as a participant in power. Fidelity is not just obedience. It is understanding, influence, and timing. Elias nodded. He understood now. Humans survived because they could act under pressure, remain calm, and influence outcomes with subtle precision. Fidelity could be shown in ways the Empire did not expect or control. The night was far from over. Each observation, each decision, each moment would test him further. Yet he felt a quiet confidence. Humans had survived far worse. And tonight, he had shown that their intelligence and resilience could not be ignored. Valera gave him a final instruction before leaving. Prepare. Fidelity will be tested in ways you have not yet seen. Alone, Elias reviewed the events. He had observed, corrected, and influenced outcomes under the Empire's scrutiny. Humans were no longer invisible. Their presence mattered. Their capability could not be denied. The ship moved silently through space, carrying officers, secrets, and a human who had begun to shift the Empire's perception of strength, loyalty, and value. Tonight, Elias understood that fidelity was not submission. It was intelligence in action. It was quiet power. It was human. Elias felt the hum of the sovereign wake beneath his feet as he walked through the corridors. The events of the previous cycles had changed everything. He was no longer just a human worker. He was observed closely by Valera and the officers of the Empire. Every action he took, every movement he made, was noted. Yet he had begun to understand the subtle rules of power and influence that humans could exploit. Fidelity was no longer simple obedience. It was knowledge, timing, and controlled action. Valera met him at the entrance to a command chamber. Her presence was as commanding as ever. "Tonight," she said, "you will demonstrate the true measure of your loyalty, your understanding, and your capacity to act under pressure." "Yes, Commander," Elias replied. He had learned to answer quickly, calmly, and without hesitation. Words were small shields in a world that judged every detail. They entered the chamber, which was filled with alien officers, each representing different worlds and systems. Their eyes were sharp, their whispers careful. A human had never been allowed in this level of strategy and observation. The murmurs were quiet but persistent, the subtle questioning of the Empire's assumptions. Valera did not introduce him. She only observed, waiting for him to act. She had placed him here not as a subordinate, but as a participant in the Empire's power. His presence alone challenged their beliefs. An alert sounded. A system anomaly had been detected in one of the remote stations. Panic rippled through the room, officers rushing to respond, calculating, shouting commands, adjusting systems. Elias observed. He noted the errors, the gaps in logic, the misaligned actions. "Divert the auxiliary power to stabilize the anomaly," he said calmly. The room froze. Humans were not supposed to give orders, much less correct officers of higher rank. Valera's eyes gleamed. She issued the command to follow his guidance. Engineers and officers adjusted systems as Elias instructed. The anomaly was contained before it escalated into a catastrophe. The room relaxed slightly, but the tension remained. Elias had acted without arrogance or display. He had corrected mistakes quietly, efficiently, and effectively. The Empire had assumed weakness. He had shown insight. Hours passed. The chamber became a center of observation. Elias continued to act as a guide and strategist. He identified threats, traced inconsistencies in data, and offered solutions without challenging authority. Each action was a quiet proof of human adaptability and intelligence. Valera observed him closely. "Your actions demonstrate more than obedience," she said quietly. "They demonstrate clarity, understanding, and influence. Fidelity is not simple submission. It is measured in insight and timing." Elias absorbed the words. Fidelity could mean more than following orders. It could mean observing, analyzing, and acting strategically when the moment demanded. It could mean being the instrument of change while appearing compliant. Another alert sounded. This time, the anomaly threatened multiple systems. Officers reacted quickly, but errors in calculation caused delays. Elias stepped forward. "Divert power through the tertiary conduits," he instructed. "It will stabilize the systems until engineers regain control." The officers complied. The threat was neutralized. Elias had acted decisively, quietly asserting influence without stepping outside the bounds of his command. Valera's expression remained calm but approving. She had placed a human in a position meant to reveal weakness. Instead, he had demonstrated strength, calm, and efficiency. Later, Valera and Elias moved to a private chamber. "You have survived tonight not merely as a human under command, but as a participant in power," she said. "The Empire has underestimated your kind for too long. Fidelity is not obedience alone. It is understanding, influence, and precise action." Elias nodded. He understood. Humans survived because they could act under pressure, maintain calm, and influence outcomes with precision. Fidelity could be shown in ways the Empire did not anticipate. The night continued, each moment testing him further. Each observation, each decision, each action was a measure of human capability. Elias knew that his survival was not enough. He had to demonstrate that humans could act intelligently, effectively, and without fear even under the Empire's scrutiny. Valera left him with a final instruction. "Prepare for what comes next. Fidelity will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine." Alone, Elias reviewed the events. He had corrected errors, stabilized systems, and guided officers through complex problems. Humans were no longer invisible. Their actions mattered. Their intelligence and resilience could not be denied. The ship moved silently through space. Elias understood that fidelity was not submission. It was knowledge, influence, and strategic action. He had survived, but more importantly, he had proven that humans could shape outcomes quietly, subtly, and with precision. Tonight the Empire had seen the true measure of human capability. They had watched, they had noted, and they had begun to reconsider what it meant to command, to observe, and to survive. Elias prepared for the next cycle, knowing that each moment would be an opportunity to show the Empire exactly how human fidelity differed from mere obedience. It was quiet, controlled, and powerful in ways they could not yet understand. And he was ready. Elias walked through the corridors of the Sovereign Wake with quiet confidence. The previous cycles had tested him, observed him, and measured him. He had proven that humans were capable of more than obedience. They could act with intelligence, patience, and influence under pressure. The Empire had watched, and their assumptions had begun to change. Valera met him near the inner chamber. Her gaze was sharp, as always, but there was a subtle shift in her expression, a hint of recognition. "Tonight you will see the final measure of fidelity," she said. "Not just obedience, not just survival, but the ability to influence and endure. The Empire has underestimated your kind for too long." "Yes, Commander," Elias replied. He had learned that words were small shields in this world, but actions were proof. They entered the chamber together. Alien officers from many worlds filled the space. Their eyes, sharp and calculating, followed him. A human here had never been allowed this level of observation or participation. Whispers moved through the room like currents of tension, subtle but impossible to ignore. An alert sounded. A critical station on the edge of the system was under attack. Officers scrambled, issuing commands, calculating responses, and adjusting defenses, Elias observed. He noted errors in timing, gaps in logic, and small mistakes that could escalate into disaster. He stepped forward. "Divert the auxiliary systems to stabilize the station," he said calmly. His voice carried authority without arrogance. The room froze. Humans were not supposed to give orders here, much less correct officers of higher rank. Valera, however, issued the command to follow him. Engineers adjusted systems, and the station's crisis was averted before it could escalate. The chamber's tension remained, but respect began to form. Elias had acted efficiently and quietly, demonstrating that humans could perform under pressure without challenge or display. The Empire had assumed weakness. He had shown capability. Later, Valera led him through restricted corridors deeper into the ship. Panels, screens, and control systems surrounded them. Humans were rarely allowed here. Observation was constant, every decision recorded. Fidelity was tested in every detail, and Elias understood its full meaning. "You will see more than any human before you," Valera said. "Observe, understand, and act only when necessary. Fidelity is not obedience. It is insight, influence, and timing." Humans had survived for centuries not through strength alone, but through awareness, adaptability, and precise action. Tonight, he would show that fidelity could be quiet, subtle, and powerful. Hours passed. He identified errors, predicted threats, and offered solutions without challenging authority. Each action was proof of human intelligence and patience. He was not merely surviving. He was influencing outcomes, guiding decisions, and quietly reshaping the perception of humans within the Empire. Another alert sounded. The ship's auxiliary systems were at risk. Officers reacted quickly, but with hesitation. Elias stepped forward. "Divert power through the tertiary arrays," he instructed. "This will maintain stability until repairs are complete." The officers complied. The threat was neutralized. Elias had acted decisively, subtly asserting influence without breaking protocol. Valera observed, approving in silence. She had tested him under extreme scrutiny, and he had responded with clarity and efficiency. Later, alone in a private chamber, Valera spoke. "You have survived tonight as more than a subordinate. You have demonstrated understanding, influence, and precise action. Fidelity is not obedience alone. It is intelligence under observation." Elias nodded. He understood. Humans survived because they could act under pressure, remain calm, and influence outcomes. Fidelity could be shown in ways the Empire could not control. The night continued. Each observation, each decision, each action was a test. Elias knew that his survival was not enough. He had to demonstrate that humans could act intelligently and effectively, even under scrutiny. By the end of the cycle, Valera called a meeting. She addressed the council and the officers. "Humans are not what we believed," she said. "They are not weak, nor insignificant. Their actions, intelligence, and endurance have proven invaluable. They will no longer be underestimated." Elias stood quietly listening. He had not sought recognition, yet it came naturally. The Empire had learned that humans could influence events without overt power, guide outcomes without command, and survive under pressure with calm precision. Valera turned to him. You have shown fidelity in a way the Empire has never seen. You have survived, guided, and influenced. Humans are no longer invisible. Elias understood. Fidelity had never been about obedience alone. It was knowledge, timing, and subtle action. It was the quiet assertion of value in a system designed to suppress it. He returned to his quarters, reflecting on the events. Humans had survived countless pressures, systems, and threats. Tonight, he had proven that intelligence, patience, and adaptability were as powerful as command. The Sovereign Wake moved through space, carrying officers, systems, and a human who had quietly changed how the Empire viewed loyalty, capability, and strength. Fidelity had been tested, and the outcome was clear. Humans could no longer be dismissed, underestimated, or controlled through fear. Elias prepared for the next cycle, knowing that his actions had lasting consequences. Humans were now acknowledged, observed, and respected. Fidelity had been shown, not as obedience, but as insight, influence, and quiet power. The Empire had learned. Humans had survived. And in that survival, they had begun to shape the future quietly, effectively, and inevitably.